So is it visible?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Okay, sir. Good morning to everyone present here. I'll be giving my presentation on gender and development. So, what I'll be covering in this presentation is first I'll start with what is gender and what is development. Then I'll go on to gender equality and gender mainstreaming. I'll be then doing the development approaches and why gender matters. Then I'll be talking about gender and development as an approach, the benefits, and how we include men in the equation. And then I'll be wrapping up my presentation. So first, I'll start with what is gender and then what is development. So gender, as we all know, it is one of the universal dimension on which status differences are based. It is a social construct. So there is a difference between gender and sex, where sex is biological, gender it is learned through socialization. It varies in time and space, and it specifies the socially and culturally prescribed role that men and women are to follow. So as we know that men they have more physical power are to follow. So as we know that men they have more physical power, so we don't consider men and women as gender equality, but it is known as gender equity because of the differences in the physical power. Whereas development, what is development? It is the process that creates growth, progress, positive change, or addition of physical, economic, environmental, social, and demographic components. Its purpose is to upgrade the quality of life of the population and the creation or expansion of local, regional income and employment opportunities without damaging the resources of the environment. So anything which leads to progress or growth is known as development. Gender equality and gender mainstreaming. So gender equality means equal opportunities, rights, and responsibilities for women and men, girls and boys. So now we all know that we live in a democratic country. So earlier there was the orthodox system, there was the patriarchy was at its peak, but now gender equality is coming into being. We see all around us about women empowerment because we were known as the second sex. So equality does not mean that women and men are the same, but women and men's opportunities, rights, and responsibilities do not depend on whether they are born male or female. It implies that the interests, needs, and priorities of both men and women are taken into consideration. So there is no partiality. So equal rights, opportunities is when those are given to both the genders, then gender equality is said to come into being. Now, what is gender mainstreaming? It is a strategy of achieving gender equality. So, gender equality cannot be just said and cannot be achieved overnight. There must be some strategy or policy. So, strategy is to end gender blindness in development process, especially in a country like India, which is drunk in patriarchy. These this type of strategy is a must. It ensures women and men, girls and boys have equal access to control over resources, opportunities, and benefits at all levels. So here is a small picture which I'm going to explain about gender mainstreaming. So we all know that there are policies in different institutions of the society. So there are informal institutions, formal institutions, households, and market. Now these policies they might not have the same favorable conditions for both the genders. So gender mainstreaming, the intervention which we can see in the diagram, this is gender mainstreaming, the strategy which oils so that gender equality is obtained. And when gender equality is obtained, there is economic opportunities, there is endowments, agencies, and the cog it works in a very smooth manner, which leads to growth and resilience. And according to the definition of development, anything that leads to progress and growth is known as development. So gender mainstreaming helps us to achieve gender equality, which helps the society to function in a better way, which leads to the development. Now we'll talk about the development approaches. So why gender matters? There were a number of problems earlier which women were facing. Now I will not be talking as in favor of women, but here there are two types of developmental approaches which have come into being, that is women in development and women and development. So this was mainly taken into consideration of the problems which are faced by women. So I'd like to talk about in brief. So women in development, their main objective was that women are not a part, they are not included in the process of development. So their main objective was to put women in that process. But there were limitations to this approach because they did not focus on the economic, political, and social growth as a whole. They were just focusing on how to include women in the development. development. Then that led to another approach, which is women and development. So in this is like a counter to the women and development approach, because in women and development, they believe that women were already a part of the process of the development, but they were not getting the equal amount of, let's say, rights which were mentioned in that, which are mentioned legally. So this led to, uh, and they wanted to exclude men, like in this women and development approach. So that led to gender and development approach. So we'll get to the main focus of this presentation, that is gender and development. So its origin came about in the 1980s and represents amalgamation of many feminist ideas. The objective of this development, it looks at the impact of development on both men and women, supporting the equal participation of both in development and emphasizing equality of benefit and control in everyday events. So they talk for both the genders. This is not just biased, even though they had the introduction of many feminist ideas which put forward this approach, but it looked for the development of both men and women. The gender and development approach is not concerned with women exclusively, but the way in which gender relation allots specific roles, responsibilities, and expectations between men and women. So, this, for example, in agriculture, what happens is that power is needed, manpower is needed. So, there, even if women apply, they might not be in this field, but they will have their own sector in which they can function. So gender and development, it tries to balance out this equation between men and women. Now the focus is on the social or gender relation, which is the division of labor between men and women in society, and seeks to address issues of access and control over resource and power. Earlier, everything was entrusted to the men. They had the right to say, they had the right in everything to make this in regard decisions, uh, decision makings, and even if we take a scenario of a local gram panchayat, there the patriarchy would be very highlighted. But here it's the focus on the gender relation between men and women. So if men and women come together and work as a unit in a society, then they will be able to address the issues of access and control over resource and power. It emphasizes both reproductive and productive role of the women, where women were put into the stereotype of just doing the household work, not going out of home. They were like the homemakers, whereas men were the breadwinners. But it is now this also emphasizes on how women can become the breadwinners of the family. So gender and development treats development as a complex process that is influenced by political, social, and economic factors rather than as a state or stage of development. This approach is about empowering those who are disadvantaged in a community and enhancing and changing their lives for better. So, irrespective of the fact that they are male or female, this approach is about empowering those who are backward, or those who are disadvantaged in a community, and how to change their lives and how to make it better. So benefits of the gender and development approaches, it brings about positive change in gender relation and more respectful social attitude towards women. Now, many of these benefits are relating to women because there was the amalgamation of feminist ideas, but let's not be mistaken that they just support feminism. More decision making and political participation by women in the community, women's increased knowledge of their legal rights, greater likelihood that girls would stay in school. Now, why we just talk about women is that because the suppression was more on the women if we take the history of the genders into consideration. But this does not mean that they are reducing the opportunities or they are trying to ignore the opportunities and rights of men. They reduce violence against women, improve communication and mutual support between men and women on family planning, HIV and other sexually transmitted infections. So this is trying to make the society a better place by educating the society as a whole. What makes up a society is the people who are living in it, and the people are both male and female. There's increased knowledge by men of women's health and care issues. Shift in attention about shared roles and responsibilities between men and women in child rearing, labor, and reproductive health issues. Where earlier men were ignorant about the women health issues, now they are becoming more they are getting more informed about it. They know how to react in certain situations, how to help out if there is no other female counterpart there to help the person. Now, including men in this equation. So, in this slide, we see this picture of what feminism actually is and the wrong concept. Usually, what happens is that majority of the population, they have a wrong notion about feminism, and that is not just their fault but also because of the different kinds of feminism that exist. So feminism is actually breaking from the shackles of the society, fighting for the equal rights along with the men. But what people they try to misconstrue is that feminism is trying to suppress the men. So this wrong concept of feminism must be removed from the society, where requirements are to meet the needs of the gender equality are there, but even if you take out a policy, you should practice it. So this is how we include men in the equation, practicing the policy that is there. Because just saying it won't make a difference. You have to practice it and be well informed about it. So I come to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to conclude by saying that there are many development challenges to be tackled in the early decades of the 21st century. The field of gender and development has much to offer for developing both analytical paradigms and new institutional practices. So I come to the end of my presentation, and thank you.
Okay. Bipin, are you